Now, President Emmanuel Macron abruptly left the European Council summit in Brussels today to handle the protests back here at home. Macron canceled a media conference and made no comment to reporters as he left. For more on this and what's being discussed at the summit, let's cross to our Europe editor, Armin Georgian, in Brussels. Armin, what's the reaction been there to Macron's sudden departure?
Well, the events in France have certainly been a sort of cloud over this second day of the council in Brussels. Earlier on, the Polish Prime Minister, in an apparent dig at Macron, said that the Polish suburbs are safe and that people in Poland are not afraid to go out after dark. And he was contrasting that with the situation of suburbs, not just around French cities, but also, as he said, cities in other Western European countries. We also just heard Prime Minister De Croo of Belgium, who was briefing us just a few moments ago. He referred to the unrest in Belgium because there have been some clashes in Brussels as well, and he pushed back on this idea of contagion from France into Belgium. He said that France is not the same as Belgium, and he said the Belgian police has intervened very quickly in Brussels and detained dozens of individuals, and basically that the Belgian police was moving quickly to try to stop a similar thing happening in Belgium.
Now, Armin, business did continue, of course, at the summit after Macron left. And high on the agenda was disagreement over a plan for countries to share refugees arriving in Europe. Now, Hungary and Poland were not happy about this plan. What's the latest there?
Well, the latest is that there is no deal on a migration text. They were trying to iron out these differences overnight and all throughout the morning and early afternoon. Those efforts have now failed. So as a result, the President of the EU Council, Charles Michel, is going to publish his own conclusions, which will, we understand, take note of Poland's and Hungary's objections, but it seems that the EU 27 as a whole have decided that it's better to leave out mention of migration altogether rather than mention in their joint final text the differences with Hungary and Poland, because that would not be a very good look for EU unity, as you can imagine.
Now, Armin, one final question about China. The EU committed to reducing the bloc's dependence on China. How did that work out?
Well, the text really reflects the different opinions and nuances within this EU bloc. So there are some EU member states that emphasize their support for Taiwan traditionally. Other EU member states that put a bit more emphasis on the one China policy, which is essentially that Taiwan is part of China, and you can see both of those positions in these final conclusions of the summit. So, for example, the summit says that there should be no unilateral attempt to change the status quo by force in the Strait of Taiwan. That is code for there should not be a Chinese invasion of Taiwan. But at the same time, the conclusions also talk about that the EU still stands by its one China policy. So that looks a little bit contradictory. And similarly, it calls China a strategic competitor and systemic rival, but it also calls for constructive and stable relations with China. So again, you can see the tensions between the different countries in the EU bloc in the final language. And on de-risking from China, yes, they do mention that, but no details on how they actually intend to take that forward in these summit conclusions.